Next up, we have Bertie Coetzee. I think many of you know him. He is the owner of Loeweland in Prieska, and he runs an exceptionally successful mixed farming system enterprise. He lives and breathes regenerative agriculture and brings a practical and hands-on perspective rooted in years of experience. So thank you, Bertie, for traveling all the way to be here.
Ja, thanks almal. Ja, bit on my senuwees here this morning. Yeah, last time I spoke at a agriculture event was in Bergville in KZN on a NOTAL conference. And when I came off stage, Oom Egon Zunkel, who's a massive regenerative farmer, he was like the chairman guy, and he said, thanks Bertie, that's the first time I heard an organic farmer that doesn't smoke what he farms. I'm like, but yeah, but I drink what I farm, so I hope that that works. Yeah, so this is a bit like pitching up with your backtrack at the jazz festival here for me to speak about vineyards. So normally when I speak at those things and I speak about vineyards, I can just say whatever I want because nobody's got a clue. We're in the Free State or whatever. So yeah, we up in Prieska. I haven't worked with PowerPoint for a while on these things. Can I do it on the... going down. Can your finger cover one yeah. So we are up in Prieska in the middle of the Northern Cape. Yeah, I said to my father when we started with the wines that if Jan van Riebeeck ended there on Oranje Moond, we would have been like the Swartland in Prieska, but then he came all the way to Cape Town. So Etienne, I see your map still doesn't have Prieska in it. No. Or any of the Orange River guys. Come on, man. Yeah, so we are very far from the ocean. I don't know if everybody's as far from the ocean anywhere. And yeah, we are irrigation farm, mostly was maize and cattle and some sheep and so on. So yeah, it's great to speak here. I think there's so many people. Before I went farming, I let my wife and me decided we have to like just get our heads on farming because we were in the music for so long. And I started doing random stuff like brandy making course and a wine making course and anything that's anything to do with farming. And I did a compost course with Tannie Prof Barbara van Wegmar. And yeah, it was technical and I got really into it. And when I left, I asked her, okay, Prof, but now how do I know that this compost is working? And she just looked at me, head shaking. Obviously, there's a lot for me to learn, that kind of look, and said, well, you take Alette, which is my wife, and you take a bottle of wine and a picnic basket, and then you walk into the field, and then you just go sit there, and then you'll know. So I took that by heart, so if there's any technical questions, I'm not sure I'll be able to answer them. But yeah, it's a moving farm. There's a lot of complexity in it. I think once you start farming organic, and for me in the beginning, I know like Johan's story, I had no idea what organic was. I just left everything. And if you're in Prieska, I think it's a bit of a better call than when you're in Stellenbosch. So it's very dry, and some of the things still worked, even though we just left everything. And over time, we just kept going with it. So I know it's a wine talk, but I think for me, it will be impossible to talk about our wine operation without talking about the whole thing. So I'll try and run you through it very quickly. Our wine part is just 9 hectares of our operation, which is pretty small in terms of our production of all the other crops. But in terms of our direct-to-consumer model, the wine is basically the driver. So that's quite interesting. And I mean, when I went farming, well, let me start you with a vision. I'll get there now. So basically our vision that we put out for ourselves, we called it Doen het 25, and I'll tell you a story about Prof Muhammad Karan, which is where I got the Blue 22 thing from. But our whole thing when we got to the farm was to write this vision of how we want to see the farm in many years. We called it Loverland 2020, and then nothing happened, so we had to call it Blue 22, and then we didn't get there, so then the guys on the farm, I asked them, so what do we call it now? And they said, Doenit 25, because obviously we're not doing it at the moment quick enough. So yeah, that came from the farm side. So we called it Doenit 25. We are not making the deadline at the moment also. But the idea is to deliver a diverse basket of goods at great value, whatever. I mean, everybody's got a different perspective of what value is, but for me it must be amazing. And I think the quality of everything we do, and obviously with wine, that's obvious for everyone, but I mean, if you put a organic steak on somebody's plate or organic bacon or whatever, they'll forgive you once if it's not great, and the next time they won't forgive you again. So it's a lot of complexity. It's tough to deliver quality of so many things all at the same time, but that's a challenge that I really love. And it's not always time to focus on the details if you try and keep this big picture floating. So there's a lot of detail that's going to go missing in this, but that's fine. So yeah, regenerating our soils, wildlife, social environment. I think in this type of complexity, I found over 12 years that I have no answer on it. Recently, I just discovered again that it's even more difficult than I thought, but it's a human thing. I mean, we can talk about the soil and about everything you want, but if the humans operating this doesn't understand and buy into it, it's not happening. So a lot of our time is spent on the farm, on explaining, on getting people involved. We run a bottom-up management. I make basically no calls in a week. I just make sure that everything stays within our parameters of what we want to do, and then the guys come up with their own solutions. So yeah, that's the team. We have a truck, we have direct-to-consumer. We have an animal team. They call themselves the mob graze guys, because everything is in a mob. And yeah, that's our delivery guys and the logistic team this side. So yeah, a bit of background is, did a bit of permaculture courses, that kind of stuff. When I got to the farm, I was like, I didn't want to work with the poisons. I didn't want people to work with the poison. It was too much stress for me. So I thought I'll just let it go and see what happens. And then another thing is, my passion is just to integrate everything and see how it unfolds. And mostly, there's no answer to it. You have to see what happens. And that's just basically what we've done. I see in the business schools, they call it safe to fail. And then they say you must do it small and whatever. But we just went straight on and did it as big as we could sometimes, and it didn't always work. But I mean, if you farm in Prieska, I think something that in the Western Cape we don't understand, and it took a while for me to understand, is you go to these no-till conferences and people farm soybeans and sunflower and maize and all this stuff. But in Prieska, we are 1,000 kilometers from everywhere, and you can only sell corn and wheat at the co-op. So then everybody's like, yeah, you must be more diverse. And I'm like, yeah, but where are we selling this stuff? I mean, I can plant it, but where's it going? And then when we bought our own truck, I realized having a truck for us is like a farmer having a padstal. You know, whatever, you know, if you get it in the padstal, it will sell. So we had like a movable padstal. So my mission became just to get the truck full. Whatever I can get in the truck, we can produce, and then hopefully from there it will gain traction. So we had to like really turn the thing around, and the fact that we love wine, and I love wine, and I grew up with wine, was like, well, if the wine guys can do it, then why not the grain guys? And I think the discussion came up. I met James Moffat, which is an organic farmer in the Free State, which was 30, 40 years before his time. He's living in Wolvengat now, but it's one of those guys where I heard his name so many times, and then one day I went into my mailbox and I put in his name, and there's just like these mails where people told me to go visit James, and I didn't. So anyway, I ended up with him, and we started talking. He was farming this weird wheat from the Free State. He called it the Witvol and all that stuff. And he stopped his operation, and then we took over his milling equipment and everything. But just the thinking of wheat varieties like grape varieties was crazy for me, because we eat one wheat which is hard red, but I mean there's millions in the world. So you even call it broodkoring, like bread wheat in South Africa. That's like calling any grape wine grape, which what Craig is doing. But yeah, it's kind of that's basically it. So we started thinking like in wine. We started thinking with everything, the meat, the breads, and so on. And from there on, we built on it. So yeah, in a complex system, I think there's a lot of things you need to think about. And if I talk about what we're doing, it's basically a study in complexity. That's the main thing. And this is 4 things we put on the board for our team just to try and focus on, because there's so many things to focus on, to try and narrow it down a bit. And I mean, complexity, I think if we have these discussions like Etienne is saying, and people phone, and I get so many of these calls. And then people ask me the most detailed questions, and I'm like, I can't even, how many pigs do you have? Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. How long do they stay in the camp? It depends. What time of the year, when, who's in charge, who made the camp? I don't know. How many pigs per square meter? See, I never made that sum, so I don't know. But anyway, this is a discussion that comes up a lot, and I remember you guys, probably most of you studied in Stellenbosch, and my father always, when it got too much for him, and we had a big bottle of Alto or something, and we were, you can probably call it fighting about what the next moves are. What's the word wanneer jy nie regtig beklei nie, jy net stry? And he would tell me, Professor Kassir said, you can only farm with 4 things, and you can't farm with more than 4 things. And I said, but I studied with Karan, and I realized after studying with him that I only farm with 4 things. One is annual crops, the second one is perennial crops, the third one is ruminants, and the 4th one is monogastrics. And I think that sums up how we try and approach things, because if you're going to have sheep in the vineyards, and it's going to be a massive farm, and one guy's got his KPIs on the sheep's performance, and the next guy's got his on the yields or whatever, it's going to be a fight, because if everybody tries to optimize the one thing, the farm is never going to go into that complexity. So that's the most difficult part, I think, if you have to go into these discussions, because you're probably not going to be the best Dexter farmer if you run it in your vineyards. And you might say you're not going to be the biggest vineyard farmer with the biggest yields if you do the same thing. But at the end of the day, the outcome of the farm is all that matters in terms of this whole approach, your total yield of everything. And I think that's where we are trying to go. So within that, obviously, you need to be consistent in terms of certain things, like if you don't move the goats, especially at 9 o'clock, they're going to move themselves. They get into such a pattern, it's crazy. It's like, even me, I realized that obviously if I sit in the office and I just want to look at the cattle quickly, and I go stop the bakkie, walk into the cattle, they look at me like this, and then they move themselves. So I realized that I can't interfere there, because when the bakkie stops, they know they will be moved, so I need to stay away, otherwise we're going to chase cattle back. So there's a lot of things you try to be consistent on. We try to sell solutions and not products, so I mean, you want to really have healthy food for your kids in the kosblik and stuff, and it gets tough because you don't know if Woolworths do what they say, and you don't know all these terms, regen. I mean, all of us has no idea what regen is. Now we try and tell the clients what it is. So everybody's so confused. So we just try and say, okay, don't worry, we'll just deliver at your house, whatever you need, and you don't need to think about it again. And then obviously the quality must be good. And then we try to sell value, not time. That's one of the things I try to just get across to all the guys working on the farm. So yeah, our products are in many places, in many forms. There's our wines. It changes every year. We don't bring out every wine every year, thanks to Etienne letting me throw away half the wines some of the years. And that's... so again, Prieska is very dry. Yes, we have the Orange River. Yes, my father designed it so that these big tractors can fit in between the rows. So there's not a lot of stockies per hectare there. But they can fit a lot of cattle in, which is nice. And that's about October, and we don't have irrigation in between the rows. So that's everything self-seeded on the bunkies, and then we just let it go from there, whatever happens. I had to talk about no-till, but I can't talk about no-till because even my no-till equipment can't fit into the vineyard. So there is no no-till. The only thing that gets in there every now and then, apart from animals, is maybe a bossislander. If the animals were on another place or too late or we didn't graze them correctly, then we will do a bossislaan. Otherwise, we don't get into the vineyards at all. The sprayer maybe for a foliar, but yeah, I try not to even do that if I don't have to. So yeah, that's veg. The answer to any question you might ask me afterwards is veg, more veg. So I know we must be diverse, but I'm ending up having a monocrop of veg at the moment. So I really am trying to get the weeds back, because just to get me some diversity there. But what I love about veg is itself seeds on the bunkies. In Prieska we have super extreme, so when the heat comes around December, basically it's looking for sun, so it's growing to the sides. And then when the heat comes, it just kills itself off, reseeds, and then it starts again around April. So basically, nothing has been done in that vineyards apart from the usual pruning. And yeah, so if I'm going to talk about finances, I don't think I even have a budget for the vineyards. I don't know, Malan, there's Malan, he's our financial guy. So yeah, basically everything that we do in the vineyards can be, the cost can go to something else. So if you want, you can show a big profit in the vineyards. So yeah, just running a bit through the farming practices. So again, this is now about grain crops and so on. But at Talbon's celebration day the other day, I saw Stian, and I think last time I saw him, he was still selling chemicals or something, and now he's planting no-till vineyards organically into cover crops. That was amazing. I don't know. What's the farm? Is it Noble Hill? And I thought I'll keep this up here because I thought it's amazing to plant maize like that. And then I saw people are now planting vineyards like that. And that is super exciting. So we do organic no-till, what they call green planting. The only other person I've seen really do it is a guy called Rick Clark, I think, which has been doing it for super long. Where you basically just plant into green stuff without doing anything else. We designed rollers, we designed stuff, and at the end of the day, we don't use any of that anymore. We just go straight in. I hope this video works. This was actually a lot of veg. These days, I don't even roll anymore, so it's standing up more, but this is an older video, but this is us planting organic millies. I showed this video at the Richard Perkins course, and he looked at the video, and afterwards he was saying, "What's the two guys doing at the back of the planter?" Because in Sweden that's not happening. Yeah, learning. Yeah, so pasture cropping is amazing. There's a guy called Colin Sice in Australia. He still uses some chemicals, but it's an amazing process how he plants his wheat into perennial grasses. Obviously, summer grasses going into winter season. He uses the frost in Australia. But this I love because this is organic pumpkins that I planted into perennial pastures. And I mean, if you want to plant anything in, I'm talking ryegrass, cocksfoot grasses, clovers, lucerne, chicory, anything you can think of. And I went straight in. I did use a ripper and then a small disc just to clean the rows on which the pumpkins that go. But instead of going for small spacing, I went for 2.28, which meant my tractor can fit in my slasher. I have a little roller, even the disc if something goes wrong. End of the day, we just slashed. We didn't have to use the disc. And that was just like, I mean, these pumpkins are super fast, and it's Prieska in December, so it was probably 4 weeks after planting. But I mean, you can't even see anything, and that was like a proper perennial pasture. And after harvesting, we just took off the pumpkins. You leave the rotten stuff right there on the veld, send the pumpkins in to clean the rest. You don't need to sort in the store. You don't need to transport stuff to the Netherlands, and then they decide they're going to throw it in a landfill. So yeah, it's once this system is starting to run, you really save a lot of time and effort. And I hope that the pumpkins are not too good, because otherwise there's no feed for the pigs. So you're like hoping that stuff is, yeah, there must be a bit of waste, otherwise our system doesn't work. Yeah, this is something that I love, intercropping and relay cropping. There's a guy called Jason Mauk. Yeah, he's a crazy guy. He says if you He's from America. He's doing this relay cropping with soybeans into wheat and stuff. And he says his grandfather calls it or something like crazy farming or something. But he says if you do a trial, you have to do it right next to the road so that you can fail gloriously. And for me, the road goes straight through our farm, so there's nothing I can do behind a belt or a hill or something. Everything is there for everyone to see. So I do get a phone call at least once a week about people wanting to buy the farm. And then I say, but why? But you're doing nothing here. It's not good for the ego, but. So this was organic maize about 3 or 4 years ago. I used to get super technical on every other row is a different crop and different planting populations and going all technical on it. And then I was just like, whatever, just plant the maize, switch the RTK to, this is 76 centimeters, go to 38 and just plant again. And yeah, I did just maize, sun-hemp maize, dolichos beans and so on and so on. It was super difficult to harvest, but it was an amazing crop. Obviously the sun-hemp wanted to go for light, so the sun-hemp was just growing way out of the maize. It looked like Zambia. This was a failed one, a glorious failure, but it did look great for a while. So yeah, I did wheat. It's an ancient Khorasan with faba beans, and then I left every third faba bean row open for pumpkins to relay the pumpkins into that, inspired by Jason Mauk. But then I had too much ryegrass there, so the pumpkins, I knew the seeds are too expensive to do that trial, and then I just left the pumpkins out, harvested the two together and separate afterwards. So it was amazing to have some faba bean seeds just, because you guys that do organic farming will know the mission it is to get organic inputs. And I just gave up, and now I just basically just all my own seed. Even if there's weeds in, I just plant it again so I don't have to fill in a paper. Because that takes too much time. Yeah, so these grazing systems are, I know there's a lot of you that do it, but the interesting thing about this system for me is that you can say, it's going to work like this and the vineyard must be that high and whatever, but you can change it overnight by making the cam smaller. Even different personalities in your herd can change the behavior. And there's so many different things you can do with grazing, and it will change every day. And I mean, for instance, the sheep in the vineyards, we are also a meat rye, so we can play around a bit in season. But I mean, if the scalp, if they get bored, they start eating the leaves. They are genetically, they are grown to go like this, and then there's nothing, and then they look up, and then they start eating. So if you keep them moving before they have time to look up, they don't eat any leaves. And then obviously it's Saturday, and people are like, we're a bit lazy today, and they move 2 hours later, and then all the leaves are gone. So yes, you can't use sheep because they will eat the leaves, but yes, you can use scalp because they won't eat the leaves, depending on how you're going to manage it. So yeah, we do, the cattle is in the vineyards, has been for many, many years. The sheep we use if we have them, if we have better pasture, we use other places. The pigs are basically the one thing that's always in the vineyards, because we can control them if we have to, and we can just let them loose if we have to. So if we struggle on the bunkies, we let the big ones in, especially in summer, because it's so hot, they just have to go onto the bunkies, and they will just take everything out. It looks like nuclear bomb if they were done. And I mean, then I'm like, oh man, it was too much. And then 2 weeks later, it's just chaos again. So yeah, I think when animals are there, we talk about compaction, you talk about all the problems, but if they're handled correctly, then there is no real such thing as a problem, I think. It seems to bounce back. I mean, behind pigs, I mean, we tried to, and people that phone me about quack, I say, okay, maybe you can use pigs, but the problem is the bounce back from that quack is, is amazing when the pigs were there. Yeah, so that's the photos. Yeah, I'm very sorry it's not Dexter's, guys. I don't know if it's allowed to use if it's allowed to use other cattle, but that's a Bonsmaras with some other mixes in there. And I like that photo on the one side, and that's basically what the guys call total grazing these days. It's got more names than regenerative agriculture, but total grazing is amazing because basically you just graze until everything's gone, as quick as possible. Everything must be gone as quick as possible. And I mean, you get hardy weeds, and if you do it intensive enough, then basically they trample everything that they can't eat. So I used to have goats in there, but those goats, they really had a love for Cabernet, so I had to move them to a stock farm. But I miss the goats there. Apart from the personalities, the way they can just go straight for the hardy weeds. I mean, if you have a mixed herd, then obviously the cattle and the skaap go for the nice stuff, and the goats will like ignore everything and go eat the, what's they call boeterbos, or what's the thing's name? Yeah, it's like they want to make a point or something. Mixed herds is incredible, and I know we talk about nature and all that stuff, which is super important and always kind of like the angle that people take. And if you look at Loverland, we had last week we had a dead skaap, and Archie was running our animals. He sent me a photo. He was like, looks like a dog, but it can be a rooikat, a caracal. And I'm like, that's definitely not the caracal, because I saw the caracal right under my house yesterday. And that caracal has been living on Loverland forever. I've seen him catch a steenbok. I've seen him catch the tarantale. He's only touched skaap once, I think, in 2016 or something. And we were working the cattle, and we couldn't finish, so we left the cattle in the kraal for the night. And that night, the rooikat took 4 sheep. And then we had a farm manager that day who was also a stock farmer, and he had all the gear. He couldn't wait to get that caracal. And I told him, no, just put the cattle back. And we never lost anything again. So we have like rooi jakkals. There's a whole family living there. Other day I actually almost stepped on one because he's so relaxed. He's not even scared to see me anymore. And it's just amazing with mixers. I mean, I remember like it's lambing season, and the whole herd of rooi jakkals is just chilling in the sun, and the lambs are running there behind them. But they won't get close because I mean that cattle, even if they're not aggressive, they're so curious that, everything, a dog, a rooikat, a caracal, anything will just run. So yeah, it's been massive for us to not have to worry about that kind of stuff. Like, it's a big thing in those areas to shoot your predators and so on. But yeah, I mean, on Loverland, again, we have predatory, there's martial eagles there every now and then. There's so many falke and all that stuff. It's amazing to see all the predators coming back. And not having to worry about it is amazing. So that's the ugliest cow on the farm posing for that picture in the skaap. I couldn't find another photo in time, so I don't know if she ever calved, but anyway. That was when the goats were still around, and then I even had the pigs in a mixed herd. And that was amazing, because the pigs would go for the inkies, the goats would go for the boeterbos, and then the skaap and the sheep, and the cows will go for the good stuff. I think that was a teff, something mix. But what happened there was when the goats sleep too late, they're gone, because the pigs started taking some goats. So we had to, unfortunately, take the pigs out again. Yeah, that's the skaap just after they were sheared. They were in our Cabernet block. Yes, and I love that, having them there. And also this is a triangle. So what happens now is the team decide they're going to graze 2 rows at a time. And then obviously as they move on, the camp sizes start changing without them changing the size of the camp or the time it is in there. And then suddenly they eat like the whole row. But anyway, this was before they ate the whole row. Yeah, that's just the cattle in the vineyards in off-season. That's just the lekker thing to run them through there quickly a day or two just to take everything that's left behind. Or, I mean, if there's knapse carols or stuff that's still bothering, they just walk everything down. Our pigs are always outside. And then when we had this problem where we wean them into 2 different, we have the boars at one side and the sows on the other side. But we struggled with the little ones because they get underneath the wires when it's a bit uneven, obviously, and when a pig has learned they can get under the wire, there's no turning back. You can never retrain that. So we wean them now into these movable cages. That one weighs 3 tons too much. That was our first one. So the guys quickly realized that they have to design it a bit lighter. They tried wheels, they tried everything that's fancy, and we ended up just with a very light one that's very movable, and we move that 6 to 8 times a day, depending how big the pigs are, how many is in. And then if I post this on Instagram, I get 10 questions. What's the size of the what's the size, and I don't know what the size is. I just have to fit in. Yeah. And there's the piglets. Yeah, so they are in the vineyards 365, 24/7. If they're too old, they get moved out every 6 weeks. We move the piglets out, and the next batch comes in. And this pig has never gotten anything. So when a pig is born, before it even drinks from the mother, the first thing it does is dig in the soil. So all that microbiome, the iron, everything it needs, it's like the first instinct. And I had a friend whose father was the vet of, what was it, Malupok or something for many years. And I found him one day and said, please just come visit the farm because I just want to make sure we're not busy with something that's dangerous or something. And he went through the farm and he was like, no, man, there's nothing wrong. It's amazing. You must just check the rotation that you don't go back to the same soil within 6 months or a year just to break that pest cycles. And they sometimes get scabbed, the pink pigs, like the sun gets a bit to them and they give them ivermectin and that was the end of it. Obviously with organic there's a long withdrawal and whatever, but other than that we never do anything to these pigs. They get nothing. We mix our own mix on the farm because you can't get organic feed in South Africa. So our whole rotation, the grains, the waste from the grains goes to the pig's feed, etc., etc. The layer hens came in now. Behind the pigs you can use them, behind the cattle you can use them. In the vineyards we have a bit of a problem where they fly up and then they over the fence and then they are gone the next day. So yeah, the chickens we don't lose chickens as long as they stay within the camp. But again, we have a bit of some guys and interns that's not on the farm at the moment. And when I left, I told the guys, forget about the camps because we don't have time for the chickens. Just take the mobiles and just pull them in the middle of the mixer and let it go. Because if they're there, the jackals won't get there and you don't have to spend an hour on the new camp. So I don't know if they tried it now, but again, it's just trying to design, the whole time try and design to do as little as possible in terms of that stuff. But with the chickens, I mean, you can follow behind 4 days and then you get maybe the fly larvae, but you also eat the muskrayers. I mean, they eat those muskrayers that there's nothing left. It's not biodynamic in that sense where, like the shirt with the muskrayer on. But I mean, at the end of the day, they're going to eat the good things, the bad things, and there will be enough of both for both to come back. So now it's trying to figure out how many days behind the cattle should the chickens actually follow. Because you can say, yeah, but you can just buy protein in, but with organic farming, we're not allowed to buy protein in, and you can't find GMO-free protein. So the little bit that we are allowed is not even 20% what you are supposed to feed a chicken in protein. So I'm like trying to figure out how can I manage so that this chicken can get the proteins they need from our system. So yeah, in summer it's like 3 hours after that manure has dropped, the dung beetles are there. And the flies. In winter it's 4 or 5 days, so it changes the whole time. But then again, if you start grazing them on something like teff, as soon as the cattle move in, I mean, all the swallows and stuff are there for the insects. And I mean, the crickets are just everywhere. So now we're trying to think, why don't we chase the insects with the cattle instead of waiting for something to brew in there? So yeah, it's super interesting. I know I asked Richard Perkins and he said, no, it must be 4 days. And I said, but the problem for us is, when the chickens followed the mixed herd on our winter pasture where we planted organic maize, you could literally see where the chicken camps were all across the field and the maize were terrible. And you would think, the nitrogen is nice and it should have been good, but it was terrible because they ate the regrowth just behind the cattle and that plants went into deep rest and all the weeds came up and we had a bit of compaction just because there was no regrowth. And that maize, I mean, maize is like the weakest plant, I think, in the world in that sense. If a little something is off, it will show you immediately. And for me, it was interesting because now, I mean, in permaculture setups and so on, people say, you farm chickens because it must follow and break the pest cycles. But now people have 100 cows with 10 chickens. And the 10 chickens will never break the pest cycle. So now it's about, okay, the next step is, in this system, I think for us to figure out, must we design higher vineyards, like the Watson system and all that stuff, and what you guys are also doing there, which I think is a super interesting question now, if we're going to really start thinking about designing for, I mean, in our context, to get the sun of the animals in summer is crucial. So they should be, in summertime, they should be under the vines, under the pecan nuts. That's the one interesting question. And the next one is, if you pull the plug on commodities like we did last year, we farm 0 commodities anymore. Everything finishes up in households, apart from cattle, maybe, every year and there, and a little bit of lucerne. But the whole design of the farm is now to deliver everything in a truck. And now you start to think, okay, well, it's easy to do pigs, but not everybody eats pork. I mean, our clients probably 30% eats pork. So it's maybe not a good idea to scale the pork, rather bring the chickens in. If you bring chickens in, only so many people are going to eat eggs. Maybe you can bring the ducks in. And I think that's just super interesting now. And also to get the scales right. If you want to break pest cycles on a herd of 300 cows, you're probably going to need, what, 30,000 chickens. If you have 30,000 chickens, you're going to need a lot of tons of grains and a lot of proteins to feed them. So yeah, it's a total farm design. And I know it's a talk about wine, but I think if you talk, for me personally, if you talk this system, you almost have to let go of the focus of wine and think about the whole, and then see how wine fits back into that. That's for me the big challenge now. The last thing is just a bit of permaculture. Sorry, I don't know what the timeline is like now, but you talked about the trees there, kind of in the vineyards, and we have a little 2 hectares there that we call the Kosbos, which is the food forest, and we did a bit of permaculture. I sat through the whole Jeff Lawton thing. I don't know how I managed to do that. But amazing his knowledge, but to do it on a screen late at night is not the easiest thing. But anyway, permaculture in South Africa was something that really got me going. And there's Kenny, he's doing permaculture now in Berrydale. So it's catching up. And the thing about that is you get so many courses in South Africa, but there was nowhere to go and see, oh, this is what it looks like, if it works. I mean, conceptually, we all speak about it, but you can't see. Can you plant a vine under an apple? You know, what will happen? Will it grow up? Will it interfere? Will it be nice? Nobody knows. So we had like this little erosion thing on the farm where my father made a pivot, but the water was actually coming down from the road, and he just made the way for the water to go, like many of us farmers do, like Pavianskloof and all those places where they try and take the water away instead of keeping it on. And it just got worse every year. And then I said I want to do permaculture. He didn't like it, so on Sundays I took a tractor and a sleer block, what do you call that? And just when I had an hour or two, I just, somewhere with the eyes, try and get it a bit flat. And then we had a laser level there, and I cheated the contours to be 10 meters so that the tractors can fit in. But at this moment, there's Chenin Blanc in there, but the Chenin Blanc, the kudus, that block, they love vineyards, but they love almonds like crazy. And they love apples. So basically, and the other thing is you can't see them. And the other thing is it's not in season. So to hunt them. So there's a lot of problems, and the kudu is the worst one there. So I'm just hoping the Chenin Blanc will just get higher than the kudus as soon as possible so we can start harvesting them. They're trying. Yeah, and there we have the pigs just cleaning. You can see that's on contour, it's a mix of pecan nuts and apples and Chenin Blanc, basically. But also the varieties are crazy stuff. Some stuff a tree that looks nice in our orchard, I will just cut it and get it. I know Ferdi Ungerer, so he made most of this stuff for me. And we're just trying stuff. Even onderstokke that's not used in South Africa, we just tried everything we can there and see what happens. Yeah, so that's our permaculture operation. On paper, it's just a pecan nut orchard. Yeah, so this is some stuff I see. I mean, the earthworms and worms, our soil is split by a road. One side is alluvial on like broken lime, and the other side is Kalahari sand. And obviously, if we talk carbon and that stuff, I stopped measuring anything because I couldn't make sense of any of it. You think you hit the jackpot on carbon, and you test a month later and there's nothing. You test your worst field and suddenly it's amazing, and the best one is poor. And I just couldn't keep track of it. And my doodskoot, the last one for me was when I sent a pumpkin root sample to NemLab there. And the result I got was, you have a terrible problem and we have no solution for you. And then we found nematodes on the brassicas. And then I was like, okay, I'm done. I'm not sending any tests anymore. But yeah, so we see a lot of earthworms, and I mean the structure is changing, and the pH is coming down because we are super, what's it, saline? What's the word? Yeah, alkaline, sorry. Very alkaline. It's coming down. It doesn't relate to anything that I can measure or tell you, oh, it's amazing, I had the best wheat yield ever. I didn't, but still the samples look good and you can see it. Soil structure, pollinators, predators. I mean, the weeds are changing in the vineyards now. You don't struggle with knapsekerels that much anymore. You're starting to struggle with trees, like waggebikkie trees and hakbos. And yeah, so there's definitely a change in the signals that's being sent from the vineyards are just crazy. And yeah, that's interesting to see. I don't know what to do with it, but it's definitely, you can see it. We have our own bees, and we always plan for just having flowers. I mean, there's a lot of weeds, so there's always bees, but whenever I do a mix, even if I don't want to, I will add a sunflower in summer or something in winter. Yeah, just always bees and stuff. There's our vineyards. You can see a bit of brassica and wheat and growing, not on the bunkies, and that's just the pigs. So we feed the pigs sometimes on the ground, let them just dig and go for it. And that's normally waste that comes out when we clean the seed. So we have a wind cleaner and we have a color sorter, and everything that comes out goes back into the pig mixes, and then they just grow whenever there's a bit of moisture, they go. That's my mixed herd in the vineyards when we still had the goats there and we still forgave them. Yeah, and that was the pumpkin crop I showed you from the top in the pasture cropping. That's, I mean, earthworms, what I wanted to say is in Kalahari sand, you can't really get earthworms there because they can't eat that. So when you get earthworms in the Kalahari soil, it's that little red ones that actually can go between the particles. Where these fat blue ones you will find more in the alluvial clay, but it's just crazy now that they start to intertwine and you start getting earthworms where there never was. And yeah, it's interesting to see. Again, it's not relating to yields, but it's nice photos. Yeah, and then it's just that's the challenges for us is the managing of the complexity. Again, everything needs to shift at the same time. You know, you like that big circles in Kampala where there's no traffic light, and the only way to move is you wait for somebody to move and you move in. And yeah, trying to build it like that, everything needs to move a little bit at the same time. And obviously, if you want to make it work, you have to. Yeah, I'll tell this story because Graeme is sitting there at the back, and we have a mutual friend, DF, who's farming cattle there in Vryburg, and he came to visit me, and he was just standing there, and I tell him, yeah, this is my organic field, this is now the cover crops, and as I speak, a pig runs past us, and DF is like, and then we go to another field, I tell him, yeah, this is the vineyards, this is the columbar, I love this block, you know, the earthworms, what, and then the pig runs past, and DF follows the pig. And so we go on, and the fourth or fifth time a pig ran past, he stopped and he said, Bertie, it's going to work. I said, what? He said, now I don't know how anybody can just ignore all the pigs running past and keep focus. It's definitely going to work. It's like, okay, thanks, DF, I'll take that. Yeah. So yeah, the logistics obviously for us is crazy because we're so far from everything, but we try and make it work. And yeah, that was just a little like a picture. So yeah, thanks everyone. Wow.